Hi there, it's Susan from SG Development Solutions. Welcome to another insight into your brain, and today we're going to be talking about decision making, but decision making perhaps with a slight difference. Here's an interesting concept to get us started. You are not your thoughts. Sound a bit odd? Let me say it again. You are not your thoughts. Now, it might sound strange, but actually, for most of us, it is true for us that we become our thoughts. We end up acting as if we are our thoughts. Why does that happen? We become so closely associated with what we think that it becomes part of who we are. And what happens is the brain works really, really hard to help us to make those thoughts a reality, to stay in tune with our thoughts. So if you've ever heard yourself saying, "Oh, I'm so angry," or "Oh, I'm no good at this," or "I'm really not sure if I can make a decision about this," then your brain's actually going to try and make that come true for you. And so the more you say, "I am so angry," the more you become angry, and the more you become an angry person. Now, it's long been recognised that it can be helpful to help people try and change their thoughts as a way of managing them. So, for example, cognitive behavioural therapy may help someone to change their thoughts they have, the language that they use. So, for example, if there was somebody who was experiencing depression, they might use language like, "I am depressed." And cognitive behavioural therapy could help them to reframe that, to use different language, which might start off as, "I have depression." Now, it's a subtle shift in language, but it's quite a massive shift in terms of what the brain does next. By changing the language from "I am" to "I have," you actually start to create a bit of distance between yourself and your thought. And creating that distance starts to reduce the energy. Now, there's a saying, energy follows focus. So what you focus on is what you give your energy to. So if you have an unhelpful thought like, "I am depressed," then if you give energy to it, if you focus on it rather, you're giving energy to it. And it persists, and in some ways might even get worse. And we then find lots and lots of other bits of evidence that back up that thought. And so you can start to see how thoughts can become, we can feel as if thoughts become who we are. When it comes to decision making, those thoughts sometimes get in the way of clarity of decision making. So, it's interesting from a neuroscience point of view to be aware of why we have negative thoughts, because to be honest, we all do. No matter how positive and optimistic a person you are, you will sometimes have negative thoughts, or unhelpful thoughts, perhaps rather than negative. Why? Because our brains are programmed for survival. So our brains are actually programmed to look out for stuff in our environment that might be bad for us. And so we're sort of naturally biased towards the negative. And so that's where our unhelpful thoughts might come from. So one of the ways that you can manage that brain process a bit more is by remembering that that's what happens, but also remembering something I've said in a couple of my other blogs, that what's going on there in the brain is there's the really primitive part of the brain which kicks into action first. So when it picks up on something in our environment that we don't like, or that might cause us some stress or anxiety, or might hurt us, then it will alert the brain. And we often go into an automatic, unconscious way of responding, and that could be a thought pattern. Certainly feelings and emotions are there too. But the more evolved part of the brain, which we've talked a lot about, the prefrontal cortex, it helps us to rationalise thinking, but it's a bit slower. So what we actually need to do to get to a point where we can distance ourselves from our thoughts in a helpful, positive way, is we need to give our prefrontal cortex some time to recognise what's going on and find a different way to approach the situation. So next time you have an unhelpful thought, here's something that you can try out. When you have that unhelpful thought, don't try and push it away or try and change it. Accept it, acknowledge it, notice that it's there. You might even want to say thank you to it, maybe inside your head, but say thank you to it, because after all, it's just trying to keep you safe. Then what you can do is imagine that thought, imagine it coming out of your head and suspended in midair about 2 feet away from you, somewhere where there's a decent amount of distance, but somewhere you can still see it. So imagine it just floating there. Now here's where you can have a bit of fun with it. Imagine that thought as a cartoon character, or imagine that thought speaking to you in the voice of a cartoon character like Homer Simpson. Or imagine that thought being sung to the tune of Happy Birthday, or Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, or anything that makes you smile. And what you're doing there is you're creating that distance, and you're then actually making that thought a bit less scary. You're taking the energy away from it. Now, what you'll notice is when you put the thought out there, it might feel a bit odd at first. You might feel nothing at first. But if you sit with it for a bit, you will start to feel the energy changing. And then when you start to play around with it a bit, you'll notice your energy and how you feel physically changes as well. Now, the neuroscience bit behind what you're actually doing there is, first of all, you're giving some time and space to allow your prefrontal cortex to kick in, which means it can start to rationalise the thought. Having fun with the thought starts to release a chemical called serotonin, which makes you feel good. So smiling and laughing is going to make you feel better than you did when you were focused on this unhelpful thought. And also distancing yourself from the thought starts to reduce the production of other chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline, which naturally get produced when we're in a situation where we feel anxious or stressed or worried or fear. So that really simple activity engages your brain in a different way, which means you are no longer your thoughts, but you can see your thoughts, and therefore you have a different relationship with them. So the next time you've got a decision to make, start to notice your thoughts, and notice the ones that are helpful and the ones that are unhelpful, and notice what happens when you can take a step back and you can distance yourself from those thoughts, and just notice what happens. When you get used to doing that, you'll find you can do that more easily, and you'll find that the unhelpful thoughts don't disappear. They'll always be there, but they reduce in energy and power, which is massively, massively impactful for you in all situations, but especially when you're making decisions. So I hope you found that useful. As always, if you're trying to make decisions and you're thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure how to go about doing that, please get in touch. I'd love to have a chat with you about it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.